Hey guys, it's John with CheatSheetPros.com. Today we're going to take a quick look at our 2021 season-long NFL draft guide. This is great for best ball drafts if you're starting to draft those. Most of them go off early July. And for your season-long leagues, a lot of people want to start looking at the beginning of July when training camps are up and running and they get going and a lot of news is breaking and injuries. So this is something to kind of get you started. I'm going to post it on July 2nd or July 3rd. I wanted to do a quick tutorial video so everybody could take a look at it. So you'll notice there's two main tabs here. We have our main, which is going to have all of our information. And I'm going to start with our schedule tab so you'll understand what this information is over here. So over here on the schedule tab up top, we've got your basic schedule grid that you see on every fantasy website. And then down here we have our baseline grid, and I just use this to grab information on other charts that are hidden in the background to make it a little bit more viewable for everybody. So our main ones here, we have our strength of schedule. This is based on total defense from Pro Football Focus going into 2021. And then this is our strength of schedule for secondary rankings. So this is basically cornerbacks, safeties, a lot of coverage stuff for wide receivers, tight ends. And then we have our schedule grid for D-line ranks. So if you followed us last year and the year before, what we did is we added the offensive line versus defensive line, and we did a yardage crunch to see which running backs would have success to help us find sleeper picks and value plays during the season when we're playing DFS. Well, this can also help for season-long leagues if you're looking for a running back late in the draft, and you can kind of look at the schedule and see, the defensive lines that they're going to go up against. Now, keep in mind, these change rapidly because O-line and D linemen get hurt all the time, but this is just something to get you started. The other thing that's new that I added this year is the shadow coverage matrix for the NFL. So what I did is I went in through several different websites and I found the top 7 shadow corners, and then I pulled them into a matrix and then I put them in here so you could see which teams are going to face those shadow corners and how often they're going to face them. Now, keep in mind, the caveat to this is some of these corners will not cover the slot. So if a team's wide receiver is playing out of the slot, that doesn't necessarily mean they're going to be in shadow coverage. Also, vice versa, some will cover the slot, some only cover one side, some will travel. Like Bradbury, I think he traveled in 11 or 12 games last year. He was the most wide receiver one seeking cornerback that he would be on him the entire game. And then the red that you can see here, these are the top 4 who basically you could consider shutdown corners, so it's not a good matchup for a wide receiver one. Now, they don't necessarily always shadow the wide receiver one, but in some scenarios they will, so that's something to look at on a week-by-week basis. But the most frustrating thing you can do is be in the middle of the second round and you pick a wide receiver one and you're between two guys, and the one that you picked, you find out he's probably going to see shadow coverage 7 to 10 times. That's not good. And the other guy, maybe he's only going to see shadow coverage, 2 or 3 times. So that's probably the guy you want to lean to if you're between a couple of them. And so you can kind of see, I broke it down here each week. So if you've got a wide receiver one on this particular team, you can kind of look and see what weeks he's probably going to have a tough matchup. And then over here, I just totaled up the number of times they could see shadow coverage. Typically, they don't shadow coverage a wide receiver 2 or 3. It's always a wide receiver 1. So if you're drafting an obvious wide receiver 2, then don't worry about this. This is only for the big guys. And then over here, I just put a quick note if it's a very hard or very soft schedule for the wide receiver 1. And then you can also come over here and you can look and see, who they're going to face in the playoffs. So for here, Dallas, the wide receiver 1, has a rough end of season schedule. So they're looking at Marshawn Lattimore, Will Jackson, Bradbury, Will Jackson again, Butler, and Darius Slay. So if your playoffs are running these 3 weeks, he's going to get Bradbury and Butler in 2 of those. That's, that's a pretty tough schedule. Denver, it's a very soft schedule. They're only going to see possible shadow coverage, week 1, week 8, week 10. And I don't think there's a true number 1 that will be shadow coverage in a scenario like that. But then you come over here to Atlanta, and you think, Calvin Ridley, if he moves into the number 1 role, well, he's looking at probably Slay, Davis, Bradbury, and Will Jackson in the first 4 weeks. So that potentially could be a tough matchup for that person. And again, this is just something to get you started. And then you come over here, you look at Kansas City. Since I live in Kansas City, I like to focus on that for examples. And you see there's a lot of shadow coverage here. But the trick with Kansas City is you can't shadow coverage Tyreek Hill. He's just too fast. It didn't work when they tried it last year. And then you've also got Travis Kelce, who is pretty much also a wide receiver 1A, 1B with Tyreek Hill. But if you're coming down here and you're looking at, like, let's say Michael Thomas, with a quarterback change, his schedule looks just absolutely ridiculous this year. So he's going to get Alexander week 1, Gilmore week 3, Bradbury 4, Will Jackson. Then he has a bye. Then he has a couple softer weeks. And then he has Janoris Jenkins, Darius Slay, and Tre'Davious White in 10, 11, 12. So that's going to be tough for Michael Thomas with a new QB. And then if these guys come out here and they shadow him, if they find him to be a threat, he's going to have a rough season. But you can just kind of break down and look. Another benefit to this is if you find a scenario like this where the wide receiver 1 has a tough schedule, look at the wide receiver 2, bump him up in your rankings a little bit, because if they shadow cover Michael Thomas, the wide receiver 2 is going to get a lot more targets in those weeks. So this is just something fun to kind of play with. I put it in there. I haven't dissected it or broke it down, so to speak, but I put it in there. So this is something I'm going to look at when I go to the lake this weekend and pick out some players. And then over here for these schedules, like for example, total defense, that's what most average fantasy players are going to look at, is like, okay, who's a good defense, who's a bad defense. We go a little bit step further, looking at a secondary ranking for receivers, tight ends, and then looking at a defensive ranking or looking at a D-line rank for running backs. So over here with each one of these, what I did is I just took the average rank strength of schedule that they're facing. And so you can see lower numbers is red. Those are tougher. Higher numbers, that's a little easier schedule. And then this is basically when they're facing a bottom 10 defense, how many times, or a top 10 defense. And then I just put it in an easy percentage format so you can kind of look at it and quickly see, okay, these 3 teams right here, they're green. So Houston, Indy, Jacksonville, they've got pretty weak schedules. And then you see one down here, 75. Pittsburgh has a pretty soft schedule for total D. I mean, they stayed off 17, then you get 26th, 25th, couple tough ones, and then 29th going into their bye. And then you get a couple softies back here. And then you can look at the playoffs, 23rd, 22nd, and then 11. Not too bad. And then playoff schedule here for San Francisco. I mean, they've got a good run. 29, 25, 31, 23, 32. So that's a good schedule. And so you can look at your regular season, which is usually either weeks 1 to 14 or 1 to 15. And then your playoffs are going to be somewhere around 15, 16, 17 if you're in a bigger league. And kind of break this down for defense. We do the same thing with our secondary and then with our D-line. The D-line I don't worry about as much, but I definitely do the secondary and the total defense. So that's what our schedule tab looks like. Over here on the main tab, we have your basic information over here. You got your player name, you've got their age. The reason I watch this is when a running back gets near 30, they start to trail off. So I thought it'd be kind of fun to go in here and see some of the different ages of running backs and kind of track it. And then we have our standard positions, running back, wide receiver, tight end, QB. This is the position rank that we pull it from. We got our team. We got the bye week. So if you're drafting and you're looking at this, you don't run across 2 guys with the same bye week. You can even sort it by bye week. Or if you're in the middle of a draft, you can go in here and exclude anyone with a certain bye week. So, for example, if you're doing a best ball draft, and let's say you draft Patrick Mahomes, you draft a quarterback, well, his bye week is 12. You could come in here and get rid of all the other 12 bye weeks and then sort it down to QBs and find every other running back that could possibly be left on the board that does not have a bye week on week 12. These are projected PPR points. I just left it in there. I don't pay attention to it just because every league has different bonuses. For 100 yards, some it's 120, 125. Some don't have a bonus. Some's full PPR, some's half PPR. Some give you 1.5 to the tight end. So this is just kind of a generic standard PPR format. Auction values, they were on there. Again, I don't use this when I do an auction, but these two are just more here for something to reference and take a look at. ADP, and of course we sort of ADP low to high so you can kind of see where people are going. Towards the end of July, I want to update it, and I'm going to add a column in here for current ADP so we can see who's moving up, who's moving down. Get kind of a baseline of what we want to look at. And then strength of schedule grade. So lower number is the harder schedule, higher number is the easier schedule, which you can tell from red to green. So this is for the season, this is for the playoffs, this is overall. So if you just glance down here in the first round, you can see one of the easiest schedules goes to Nick Chubb. He has a 7 grade for the season, a 5 for the playoffs, and overall schedule's a 9.47, which is one of the highest ones. And then you can come down here and you can look at the O-line rankings. The one frustrating thing every year is if you don't watch the offensive line rankings is you'll draft a stud running back who isn't a PPR guy, and if he's got a bad O-line, he's getting demolished every week. He's not hitting that 100-yard bonus that you get in most leagues. So you can go through and look and say, okay, Alvin Kamara, he's got the number 4 O-line, but then Saquon, thank goodness he's a PPR back because he's got the dead last offensive line. So he's probably going to see a lot of stacked boxes, but he makes a lot of his stuff up in the PPR format. And then we got some players here with good offensive lines. And then we have a couple rough ones here. So Mixon, who a lot of people are high on this year because Gio left, you know, he's still got a bad offensive line and a tough playoff schedule and kind of a middle-of-the-road season schedule. So just something to look at. Keep an eye on the O-line. Green, good. Blue, bad. And then over here, this is kind of something fun new that I added. So for the 18 weeks, this looks like a crazy grid. I tried to color code it. It took me a while. But what you see is there's 2 numbers on a semicolon. The number to the left is the total defense that they play that week. So for example, CMC up here, we're going to look at him. So week 1, he plays the number 7 total D, and then the number 8 total D, then the 32nd, 27th, and then 5th. Now, the second number you see to the right of the semicolon is if it's a running back, it's how that defensive line ranks going into the season. If it is any other position, so wide receiver, tight end, or quarterback, that second number is going to be the secondary rank because a wide receiver and a tight end, they're more focused on the secondary, and the quarterback, the majority of what they do is passing, so a lot of their rank's going to come on the secondaries that they are facing. So for example, you can see here, CMC week 1 is going to face the 7 total defense, but the 31st defensive line. So that kind of gives you an idea. Some people may look at it and say, oh, the 7th total defense, you know, I'm not interested. But if it's the 31st D-line, there's going to be some room to run for him, so don't be too scared of it. And then when you get down here, the green numbers, you can see, like, here's a good matchup. Who's this? So Derrick Henry in week 2, he gets the 29th total defense and the dead last defensive line. So that's probably going to be a big week for him. He's got another one in week 5, week 7. And then you can see there's also some tough matchups here where he's got 7, well, I guess 31's not bad. But like these two here, you got the 4th total D, 8th defensive line, 8th total D, 13th defensive line. So these are a little bit tougher. And you can see if it's like a top 10 total defense, I tried to highlight it red. If it's a bottom 10, I tried to highlight it green. And if it's kind of middle of the road, I just kind of left it that kind of dark blue in the background. And then the buys we just made kind of a light brown color so they stick out and you can kind of see, you know, who what. So if you're drafting and let's say you have the 9th pick and you're going to come here and you're going to say, okay, I've got the 9th pick, so someone in this range is going to be available for me. You can look over here, you can see their age, their position, who they play for, their strength of schedule ranking next to the person, offensive lines. That's good. So say you're looking at Aaron Jones or Austin Eckler, you can see both of their offensive lines are about the same. You can see Aaron Jones has a ridiculous schedule, and then Eckler's a little bit lighter. And then you can kind of look down and say, okay, you know, Eckler has, you know, 3 of 4 easy weeks here. So maybe I'm going to go ahead and draft Eckler over Aaron Jones. And then you can look over here and say, okay, well, Aaron Jones has a easy schedule, kind of towards the end and to start the playoffs. So what I like to do is try to draft Eckler and, maximize him these weeks. And then when you go into the bye, he's going to come out of the bye with a tough schedule. Maybe flip him for one of these other guys, because an average fantasy person is going to see him probably put up really good stats in this window here where he's got these cake schedules. But then, looking at advanced stats, that he's got a tough schedule coming out. And if you can flip him for one of these guys that has a lot of green in here, then it gives you a little bit of an advantage. So especially if you're in a points league, if you're in a head-to-head league, it's not quite as advantageous. Or then maybe if you're doing really good and you get up to, where did Eckler go? You get up to Eckler's bye week, so you get through week 7, you're rolling. You go into week 8, and you're going to be in the playoffs. Then you can come out here and look at these playoff running backs and say, okay, well, who's got an easy schedule, that I could potentially take a look at? Where's a lot of green? So just something to kind of keep in mind. And you can sort by, strength of schedule, ADP, bye weeks, position ranks, whatever you need. Anyways, I'm going to get this video posted, and then we can go through and get this draft guide posted. So take a look at it. If you have any questions, let me know. Like I said, it's a good place to start. A lot of people want to look at fantasy football stuff in early July. I know I do. So take a look at it, and we'll make updates to it every couple of weeks and see where we go. Thanks, guys.